authorized by Utah Code 52-4, this meeting is being held electronically without an anchor location to reduce the risk to health and safety from COVID-19 by limiting the frequency of in-person meetings. Okay. In accordance with Utah Code 53E-3-201, the board members elect for 2021 are assuming the position of the outgoing members for purposes of the election of officers. So welcome to you all, and look forward to this. The first item on our agenda tonight is the determination of number of vice chairs.
Vice Chair Cummins?
Yes.
Excuse me, this is Lorraine. Could you do maybe a roll call so those online could see who's on?
Yeah, you bet. So I'm just going to read it in order that I see it on my participants list, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah.
So we have present Randy Booth.
Here.
Okay. Chair Huntsman. He's here.
Here.
Okay. Jenny Earl.
Yes, I'm here.
Scott Hansen.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Brent Strait.
Yes.
Laura Belknap.
Yes, hello.
Janet Cannon.
I'm here. Hi.
Molly Hart.
Here.
Kristen Norton.
Here.
Matt Hymas.
Here.
Carol Lear.
Here.
Cindy Davis. Is your audio working, Cindy? Just checking.
Can you hear me?
Now I can, thank you. Okay. Let's see. Sorry, Cindy moved, and then now I can't tell what Matt Hymas. Laura Belknap, did I call you yet?
You did.
Okay. Natalie Klein.
I'm here.
Okay. And we already called Kristen Norton, right? Okay. I think that's everyone. So don't move in line or else I get confused. Okay. Thank you for being here tonight. The first action is the determination of number of vice chairs. So I'm seeking a motion for that determination. So just as an explanation to all present, the Board of Education has the option to have anywhere between 1 and 3 vice chairs. And that is the first motion that we take prior to our officer elections. Okay, Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cummins. I'd like to make a motion that we have 2 vice chairs for the next 2 years.
Is there a second?
Second. Scott Hansen.
Okay. The motion before us is to have 2 vice chairs for the next 2 years. Is there any discussion to that motion? Okay, Chair Huntsman.
Thank you. I've had many of you give me a call on this particular motion, and I didn't speak to every board member, but I think it'd be probably relevant to let everyone know my response. My response has been to him, there's no wrong choice on whether you have 1 vice chair or 2. There's some advantages and disadvantages. I know from, and this is I only speak from my previous experiences as being your chair, and that is that people say, what are the pros, what are the cons? I know that when we had 2 vice chairs, it was sometimes difficult to get the full leadership together on certain meetings, but now with electronic means and of ways to meeting, that's hurdles been somewhat overcome, unless it's something that we physically have to be at here in the future. The other I would say is a con or a slight negative is that I do recognize it puts a little bit of a burden on staff when they're trying to reach out and do their work and get feedback on intent from, okay, the board voted on this and then they need that, or do we have this and it includes all of leadership in there, and then you're waiting for feedback, or the feedback may not come consistently back to them. And then as a chair in the past, I say, I believe this is what was meant. Those are some of the, and I'm just being blunt and bold with no sugar in the conversation, as you guys are used to it. And the new board members, I think you'll learn to appreciate it, that there's not a lot of fluff. The pluses on it is there is a way to divide. There is a way to include more people in at the table on as we're going and moving forward, the actions that the board has taken and positions as we work with legislature and other bodies out there to represent the State Board of Education. And that's a plus. There was also a plus in the past that I felt was pretty good, especially when we have a lot of turnover on the board, a lot of new board members' faces, and that bringing on a third vice chair is another resource, or not a third, a second vice chair, and having 3 in leadership is another potential resource to talk to them about any concerns or something that's coming up, or how to go make something happen. So the accessibility is a little bit better in that regard of advocacy, of different things in it. I thought it worked in the past as a positive. So that is, but there's no wrong decision in any of this, because most of the work that gets done in committees, and we're divided up into committees, and there's other opportunities for leadership. And some of the biggest, most important work that happens is between your committee chair and vice chair as they move committees agendas along and present our very best work before the board, and then the board will fine tune and tweak it a little bit. But so again, I'll circle back to there's not really either way works, but it's just what you prefer as a group at this juncture. So there's no wrong answer on this. So that concludes that's what I've shared with multiple board members, but not all board members. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I see no further discussion. The motion before us then is that we have 2 vice chair positions for the next 2 years. Oh, sorry, Mr. Straight, Brent Straight.
Oh, I guess the one thing I heard in there was that in regards to calendaring, if the leadership can get together, that's been a challenge in the past. Is it appropriate to ask if all the candidates feel like they can meet the challenges of their calendar in regards to leadership meetings?
Maybe that could be a question the individual candidates could answer when they are giving their remarks. Would be maybe just addressing that calendaring question, if the candidates don't mind speaking to that at that point.
Okay.
Okay, any further questions or discussion to the motion? Okay, I see none. The motion before us is to have 2 vice chair positions for the next 2 years. Please vote. Green check for yes, red X circle for no.
And where do we do that?
So on your participants list, so if on the bottom of your screen, you put your mouse down, the participants button will show up, click on it. There'll be a list that pops up, and at the very bottom, you should have those tools available to you. And if you can't find it, you can give a vocal vote if you would like. Okay, Molly Hart. I don't see a vote. Oh, there it is. We're up. Okay, that motion passes with one no vote. The no vote was Board Member Janet Cannon. Okay. Okay, thank you. That completes that item. Next on the agenda is the board officer elections. Before we get into the elections, Jeff Van Holten is going to explain ranked voting to us.
Thank you, Chair or Vice Chair Cummins. Jeff Van Holten, Director of Public Affairs, happy to be with you today. And I am going to play you a quick YouTube video, which is far more fun than listening to me talk. I will preface, this video was an informational video that was prepared in 2016 for the state of Maine when they considered a proposition on their ballot to switch their voting system statewide to ranked choice voting. So if you see any references to Maine and Prop 5 voting yes or no, that's what this is. And for those who are curious, Prop 5 passed back in 2016, and Maine is one of the states that does ranked choice voting for their elections. I'm going to share that, and if I can ask anyone to just give me a thumbs up if you can hear the audio so that I know that I have shared the audio appropriately, that would be great. Go from there.
Have voters rank all candidates in order of preference. So if 3 candidates running for office, you would rank your first choice with a 1, second choice 2, and third choice 3. To decide the winner, officials would only tally the 1s on each ballot. If a candidate receives 50% or more of all votes, they win. If no candidate earns 50% of total votes, the candidate with the least 1 votes would be thrown out, and a second round of counting would begin. All those who voted a 1 for the eliminated candidate would have their ballots recounted to see who they selected as their number 2 vote. Those number 2 votes would then be added to the totals for the remaining candidates, deciding the winner. Think ranked choice voting is a good idea? Vote yes. Bad idea? Vote no. It's your vote, so vote.
That is the video. Very, very brief and quick. If there are any questions, let me know, but hopefully the video is pretty easy to understand and follow in terms of what ranked choice voting is, and we do have the ability today to do that electronically. It was set up by Ben Rasmussen. Happy to answer any questions if there are any, otherwise I'll just pass it back to you.
Board Member Earl, you have a question?
I do have a question. Mine is, so each position we'll be doing ranked choicing on, is that what you're saying?
That's
so
correct.
The same position, we'll be doing our ranked choicing on that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I prefer that over the option of doing both at the same time. So thank you.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and get, oh, sorry. Okay, Board Member Earl, did you have a follow-up question? No, okay. Then we'll go ahead and begin with the board chair election. We have one nominee, Mark Huntsman. I'd also like to invite any nominations from the floor if there are any at this time. Okay, I see none. Okay, well, we'd like to invite, sorry, a little bit of fun background noise. We'd like to invite Chair Huntsman to share any thoughts.
Well, thank you. I've sent out the letter, talked a little bit about my background in that, and it's been an honor and a privilege to serve the State Board of Education as the chair for the past 4 years. As many of you know of my history, I served 8 years on a local board, came onto the State Board of Education through a practice of nominating committees and the governor, and then a short list from the governor that goes on the ballot, and was elected and served 2 years. And I was like a vice chair to finance, and I sat on a few committees. One of the highlights of my service was chairing the superintendent search, where we now have Superintendent Dixon. I've learned a lot from previous leadership. There was a lot of turnover after my 2 years in that election cycle. and I was asked to chair the State Board of Education, and I've done so for the past 4 years. I haven't sought it. I think it's all about choice, and what the board wants to do, and I've always served in any capacity that the board has asked me to do. During those 4 years, there's a couple guiding principles that I had, and that is following our policies, bylaws, and et cetera. And as a chair, you find yourself in a very neutral position most of the time, unless there's something really you want to say about something, and then you say it. I've always tried to be fair and reasonable, and another guiding principle I had is every board member's voice is relevant and important. And I tried to make sure that every board member has had that chance and opportunity in our board meetings as we follow Robert's rules. That if somebody wants something on the agenda, that we follow the procedures there to get it on the agenda, and more so that they are able to have from staff and any of the other board members the very best information they can to make an informed decision. And then once that decision is made by the board, whether that motion passes with 8 votes or it was unanimous, whatever it is, that is the direction the board is going. And as a chair and in a leadership position with our stakeholders, I've done my very best to make sure that position is moved forward. And that's how I tick, that's how I roll. And everything that we do, we should have a regard and respect for each other, and also process. If we need to change the process or change policy, then that's what we do. Board member Earl had some really good questions, I thought. And how, it's like, how do you handle a situation with board members, the superintendent, and staff when policy and programs or strategies are out of compliance with the law? So, well, we want it brought to our attention. We want an opportunity to change policy if that's what the board wants to do, in how we go about doing our business as the board. Laws are in place not to be broken, but certain things need to be defined, and that's what we do. We need to bring them to the forefront of discussions. Another question that was, what was in there is, what areas could we work better to support parents, not just policies and education? And I think parents are involved in every policy that we have, and parental input is really important. That we recognize that in the spaces that we can accept it. We're a large state with a large population. There's 15 of us that represent 15 districts, and it's our job to know what our parents want, and what they're excited about, and what they want more of and less of. And I believe that's who we serve. But we serve our parents. We serve students. We serve the education community, all the stakeholders that are there. We also serve parents, and we also serve our communities, and they all have a voice in what and how they want to shape public education. And so we, being elected, 15 board members, it's our duty and responsibility to I say this often, wear our brass pants, because there's incoming that will come to us, but we don't pull them up over our ears. We listen to our communities and education community, and parents, and we all bring something to the table, and we have that voice. And it all boils down to one thing: we have one opportunity. And as your chair, I assure you, you will have opportunities that your vote does matter, and that what you have to say and in our board meetings and committee meetings matter. And I hope I responded to some of Jenny's questions there. And again, it's been a privilege to serve you in the past. And if you put me in, I'll continue to hold the course. I have support from my business, and also my good wife and children to to hold this course for another couple of years if you choose to put me in. So that concludes my remark, unless you have any questions for me, Vice Chair Cummins. And I apologize, I'm not in my suit.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any questions from board members? Okay, I see none. Oh, go
I have a
ahead,
question.
Natalie Klein.
Yes. So, Chair Huntsman, in your opinion, will having a director of diversity, inclusivity, and equity fuel greater unity or division, and why? And do you believe sensitivity training be a focus in our schools?
Okay, one more time on the question. I barely could get that.
Okay.
And I have my hearing aids cranked up. That's one of my weaknesses, if many of you are noticing. So.
Okay, you bet. So the question was, in your opinion, will having a director of diversity, inclusivity, and equity fuel greater unity or division, and why? And do you feel that sensitivity training should be a focus in our schools?
Having a director at USBE, we had one in the past, and it worked very well. And when we had our budget cuts back in our previous recession, and that position left, and a variety of staff needed to take point. The key to the success for that equity position is really how the superintendent works and gives goals to that person. If that person is compliance driven, where it's like, okay, here's the law, this is what's happening, quotes the law, they're not in any position to have punitive damages. They're there to prop up public education, not tear it down or reinvent. But we have right now in that position, there's a ton of compliance side to that we're missing on having. We have multiple employees within USBE, and I've got to try to, I don't want to get too far down in the weeds of what the superintendent presented back with that position. But the way that I took it was we'd have consistency and a direct contact to deal with complaints, concerns, or LEAs, so that we can have a consistent message throughout our whole state instead of a variety from different staff members. So I see it being a really important role, not to totally reshape, but more of a compliance role. And if we're going to if something's going to be reshaped, it's going to be the board that reshapes things, not that position. And we pass that on to the superintendent, and we have expectations of the superintendent working with that equity person to do what we basically to perform to the standards that we set if we get into that space. Does that answer your question, Board Member Klein?
Well, part of it, the last part should sensitivity training be a focus in our schools, which if it's going to be consistent across the board, and it sounds like you believe that should be a part of it. Is that correct?
I believe it will be, because consistency is really important. And right now we're playing that game differently in a lot of our LEAs. So I don't think it would be I don't perceive it being a super significant rollout of a lot of change, but it's going to be, here are the basics, and this is what our expectations at a minimum on the compliance side. And so I think there's still opportunity for board input as things are being rolled out. And as we remember, we hold our superintendent accountable. If we have questions for our superintendent, we ask those questions and we get responses and we can give feedback. But it's a space that we don't micromanage, but if we have concerns, then we bring them forward. So I think if there's a trend or if there's something that doesn't feel right, then we definitely will talk to our superintendent about our expectations of public education. So I'm interested. I'm looking forward as a board chair or as a board member to see who is hired and what their first task will be, because it will be different when we communicate all this to our LEAs. to bring that back, but it's a space we've been in the past without controversy
Thank you.
in that space. Does that answer your question, Board Member Klein?
Yes, I think so.
Or
Thank
Board
you.
Member-elect Klein? You're a board member here today, so however we say it.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, I see none. Then we will go ahead and vote for the chair position. Lorraine, should we just look for an email that would come out right now? Is that how that's going to work, Lorraine?
Do you want to have Ben Rasmussen explain? He's the
Yes,
one that's
please.
that out.
So are we going to conduct a formal vote then with just one candidate?
Yes, we still need to do that. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, yes, sorry. We had this question earlier and Lorraine looked into our Robert's rules and our bylaws, and because we have a ballot policy within our policy and bylaws, then Robert's rules vote by acclamation doesn't apply. So we will have a formal vote.
Okay, then I will send out the ballot and you'll be getting that by email here shortly.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
Just to note for everyone that I do have to record how every person votes. So if you decide not to vote, that will be recorded in the minutes as well.
And just, anyways, we'll get to this in a minute. I don't know that we'll end up having to use ranked choice voting depending on numbers in each seat. But if you choose not to vote, you don't have to, as well as you don't have to choose to rank vote as well. So you can vote for one person per position if that's what you choose. So just as a little background information.
Okay, there you should be getting an email now.
So if anyone received their emails, I haven't received mine, but if somebody's starting to receive them, let me know.
Got it.
Got it and voted.
Complete.
I don't have one yet. Carol.
I don't either. This is Jim. Did it go to our regular or to on school's address?
I received mine in the regular email, not my school email.
Yeah, for the new board members, it would go to your personal emails. Regular board members, it's just the emails that we always use.
Very cool system, Ben. Works well, at least it did for me.
I still don't have it.
So,
Lorraine, it's Carol.
Okay, could you just send me an email then with your vote?
would you take a text while they're on this or email or does it make
I'd rather have email because then I have a record of it. I have to have a ballot.
Yeah.
Board Member Moss, did you receive yours? You're on mute.
Sorry, no, I did not receive it, so I just sent Lorraine an email.
Okay, thank you.
And Lorraine, I got my little tricky email, so I voted on that, but then it had something funny. Did it work?
Jim, I did receive your email. Thank you.
Thanks. Mine must have gone into spam. I've been getting them from Lorraine, but if it came from Ben, maybe it got caught in the spam.
The email would come from opavote.com.
Is there anyone else that did not receive?
So Lorraine, I show that we haven't received a vote yet from Mr. Straight, Member Lear, Member Earl, and Mr. Moss.
Okay, Mr. Moss emailed his to me because he did not receive the email.
You should have mine now. I've missed a step.
Okay, I was going to say, it looks like you looked at it, but
And Lorraine, I sent you an email instead. Thanks.
I have a text message from board member Earl that her internet kicked her off, so she might be a moment.
So board member Straight here, you didn't receive mine?
I got it now, Mr. Straight. It does show that you voted.
Thank you.
Jeff, would you respond back to board member Earl and see if she could cast her vote as a priority rather than getting back onto the meeting?
Ben, did you get my email? It's Carol.
I show that you've got that you opened the email.
No, I just sent an email to Lorraine. I'm sorry. Lorraine, do you have my email?
I got your email, but you may want to still try to do the vote.
I did. I don't get how it has 2 pages, but I'll just probably vote by email. It's easier.
So the only 2 that I show now that haven't voted through the vote system are Member Lear and Mr. Moss.
And I received emails from both of them with their votes.
So do you want me to go ahead and close the voting?
Yes, if everyone's vote is in, let's go ahead and close the voting.
Is Member Earl, has she been able to vote?
She has voted, yes.
Great.
Okay, welcome back, board member Earl.
Did you say something to me?
No.
That last.
Nope. I think we're just waiting to close and then we'll count the votes here in a second.
Okay, thank you.
Lorraine, is that set up?
It should be. If Jerry will give us, we need to, the 3 of us go into a room, me, you, and Ben go into the separate room.
Okay.
Hi, this is Jerry. Are you ready to go?
Yes, we are. Thank you, Jerry. Okay, thank you. All votes were received, all ballots were received. Chair Huntsman is our chair. He was voted in unanimously. So thank you for your time on that.
Thank you.
Chair Huntsman.
It'll be a privilege to serve with you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, next on our agenda is our vice chair election. So we have 2 vice chair seats to fill. So the first round will be for the first vice chair position. So I have 1 nominee for this position. If I understand that correctly, Board Member Laura Belknap.
Two nominees.
2.
Okay, so I have Board Member Laura Belknap and Board Member Cindy Davis.
Correct.
Okay, so Board Member Cindy Davis, would you like to pull your name from that position?
Yes, I'd like to pull my name from the position.
Okay, thank you. So we have one.
Only for the second.
Okay. So we have 1 nominee for the first vice chair position, Laura Belknap. Are there any nominations from the floor? Okay, I see none. Board Member Belknap, if you'd like to take a minute to make a comment or 2.
For 10 or 12? No, I won't make 10 or 12. First, I'd like to just say that I'm honored just to be elected and entrusted by the people who have elected me to this office. And I say often who I serve the children of the state of Utah, and that's who I'm. It's all about that. I would like to answer the questions that were asked, and I believe it was Board Member-elect Straight who asked about calendaring questions. And there are 2 people who I have to answer to for my time, and that is my husband and my superintendent. And I asked them long before I turned my name in to run for this. So, and time constraints, I have already covered that. Also, I would like to answer Jenny's questions, which Jenny probably could answer them almost for me. But a couple of things I thought of about our policies and our rules as we're discussing them. If we feel like there's a collision, first of all, we need to understand what the laws are so that we know we have a collision. And if we know that, we need to turn to our internal auditors and also to our AAGs to make sure that they weigh in on that. I don't have that background knowledge. I need to go to them for that information and make sure that we don't collide with our rules, don't collide with statute. The other thing is Jenny asked about critical race theories and how it should be implemented in a K-12 education, and I don't believe it should be. And then she asked, Jenny, what was the other one? Information, on how do we get parents to be involved in our education? First of all, I think it's important to note that we can't put mandates upon parents and what they do, but parents are first and continual educators of their own children. They are the number one in the state of Utah. We can't, and I think one of the things that's a continual issue with getting information to parents is that we don't have a database to send them things. We don't have that ability. So if we as board members can get that out to our constituents and let them know there's a way to put in and have their voice heard, I think that's very important. I don't know if Board Member-elect Klein is going to ask me the same question. Are you going to, or not?
I have another question when you're ready.
Okay. Well, I'm Vice Chair Cummins. Is that okay if we open that up? You're on mute. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Go ahead, Board Member Klein.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So, as far as you working for our children, in your opinion, what is the board's role, if any, in protecting the innocence of children at school?
I guess there's so many facets that I would look at that as to what is protecting their innocence, because there's all kinds of pieces that go with that. But if we're going to talk about the education of our children, our job is to make good choices as we create standards, and that they are standards that uphold what our Constitution is, that we we follow what our Constitution here in the state of Utah is when we're making those decisions about our standards.
Okay, so specifically on what about pornography on the school library and the school databases, the school and library databases? Also, in the past, there's been sexually explicit lesson plans made available on USBE's website as a teacher resource, and then put over onto the UETN's website, and lesson plans that cause kids to question their gender identity. So just wondering if you feel like the board should be doing something about that, and if so, what?
Well, I absolutely think we should be doing that. Pornography is unacceptable. And we may, even within this 15-member board, have different ideas of what pornography is. And so we need to be very careful and conscious of what children's concepts may be of that. We also need to be good watchdogs and watch what is happening, what is being produced. And it takes all of us to bring that information up so that we can share it with each other, so we can take corrective action together as a group.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, then we can go ahead and
I have a question, Chair Cummins.
Go ahead.
Vice Chair, sorry. This is Molly Hart. Laura, how would you ensure as a member of board leadership that board agendas don't become monopolized by any single issue and reflect all of the issues that would be brought up in the limited time that the board has?
So Molly, are you talking about setting the agenda or in a board meeting? I'm not clear.
Either would be great, but I was actually, I really intended for board agenda items. And so that the board agenda items don't get lost before they even hit the full board for transparency purposes.
I think something that's been very helpful is that we do have a policy that two board members may bring something forward. And then when I've really appreciated Mark and Brittany in this piece is that they have made their executive meeting for all of the committee chairs as well. So they're not setting the agenda all by themselves. They're having lots of voices in that. And I think that has really opened the door for more dialogue and for maybe a better process of getting things on the agenda.
Okay, Vice Chair Cummings, a follow-up. So would you continue that practice if you were in fact elected onto that executive committee?
I would like to, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Brent Strait, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just have a quick question. To what degree should this strategic plan drive the agenda?
Thank you, Brent. I think it's been wonderful to have the strategic plan. And actually, I have to look to Brittany because she was the driver of that for a long time. But she didn't drive this alone. We all had input into it. And what I really appreciate is now when we have an agenda item, it has on there what part of the strategic plan it fits with. And so if it's on there, it needs to fit to the strategic plan. I don't think I've ever been so questioned since I was trying to get a job.
Okay, if there are no additional questions, okay, I don't see any hands. So we will move then to the vote for the first vice chair position. And Ben Rasmussen will go ahead and send that email.
All right, I have opened the voting. You should be getting an email shortly.
Is there anyone who did not receive the ballot? We're getting better. That's fantastic. Okay. Ben, if you want to just go ahead and let us know when you see that voting is complete.
I will.
Jim Moss here. I'm still not getting them, but I sent my vote to Lorraine again.
Okay, thank you.
I did get that.
So I show everyone voted but Mr. Moss.
Okay, thank you. Then Jerry, I think we're ready to go into the breakout room. Okay, thank you for your patience. We have Board Member Laura Belknap has been elected as our first Vice Chair unanimously.
Chair, point of privilege.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm very humbled and I appreciate you all voting for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, the next item is to vote for our second Vice Chair position. We have currently one nominee, Jim Moss. Are there any nominations from the floor?
Oh, excuse me. Vice Chair Cummins, I've got some help today too. I'd like to nominate Cindy Davis for second.
Okay.
Kill my mic as quick as I can.
Okay, so then we have Jim Moss and Cindy Davis. Does that complete the nominations? Okay, I see no other hands. Then we'll go ahead and give both of them a moment to share a word or two. Board Member Cindy Davis, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I'm just happy to be here. It's a good day. These are good people that we serve with, and I appreciate having been asked to consider doing this, and I am willing to be a second vice chair on our board if it's the will of the group, if it's the will of the board. And I guess I would say that I do try to support the will of the board, and part of what we do in leadership is to understand when the board has spoken, and sometimes that means to always represent all of the folks on the board. Some of the experiences that I have had on the board have been vice chair of law and licensing. I currently am the vice chair of law and licensing. I serve also on the audit committee. I am the liaison between the Utah State Board of Education and the Utah School Boards Association of our local boards. I served previously on the Portrait of a Graduate committee. And 3 years prior to being on this board, I served on the Competency-Based Education Advisory Council for the Utah State Board of Education. And I just finished as chairperson of the Utah Valley University sort of inaugural year of the School of Education Advisory Board. And so since I'm just wrapping that up, I was able to accept this nomination, and it is something I have time to do. In my work at the university, I schedule individual students for coaching and mentoring, and I can do that on a schedule that works around each of the board leadership requirements. So I do have flexibility in answer to that question. I have really, for as long as I've been on the board, I've wanted to listen to voices. Listen first, speak second. I think in one of our board meetings, Carol nicknamed me the Great Compromiser, which made me chuckle a bit in the board meeting. But I thought, if that's the nickname I have, I'll take it, because for years, 3 years actually, I used to come and watch the board meetings before it ever even crossed my mind to run. I was curious and interested, and anyway, I used to just brainstorm ways that we could find solutions, maybe think outside the box that everybody could feel good about, so we didn't always end up with a 7-8 vote, and that more folks could get on board and feel like we were moving forward with people feeling good about the decisions that we made. So if I were to serve you in leadership, if that is your desire, then I will move forward carrying that same goal. I have a lot of questions here. I started with answers to Jenny's questions, but then now there are lots of other people that have asked lots of different questions. So I don't know if we should start over on the questions and give Jim and I a chance to answer each one as they come up, as people so choose, or if I should try to answer 20 questions, or I think I'll just wait direction from the chair, and if they try to answer a bunch, I will. Otherwise, I'll wait and go through those with Jim.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go ahead and let Jim speak for just a moment, and then we'll allow board members to ask individual questions that they have at this moment. So go ahead, Jim Moss.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cummins, and it's great to be here. I'm also very happy to be here and join this board. I've gotten to speak with almost all of you in one capacity or another. I've worked with several in board leadership and in the state office and different other roles that I've had, and I just look forward to being a part of this group. It was suggested that it might be useful to have a second vice chair, partly for the purpose of having some representation from the new group. And there's always a new group, and yet I think we come in having recently been out on the stump, although we did it from our chairs in our home this time. We talked to a lot of folks, and I gained a lot of perspective in talking to hundreds of delegates and many other people out there, and feel like we have some fresh perspective, and it would be helpful to have a seat in leadership. And so I would be happy to play that role. My prior experience is sent out. I won't cover it in great detail, but one thing I've recently come off from, it was the chair of my local district community council. I think that is such a wonderful Utah innovation that we have the land trust money, and we have this opportunity for parents and teachers and administrators to work together, not only to allocate some money to those local priorities where they need it most, but also just to have a forum for discussion. Superintendent Dixon actually mentioned something that I thought kind of set off a light in my head, that one of the teachers that she knew indicated to her that the community council had been a great opportunity for her to have a voice in decisions about the school. I've always felt it was critical to allow parents, and I do feel that that's a very essential part of the community council, but it was a bit of a revelation to me that teachers also felt that they needed that voice and appreciated that voice. And so that's where I would come from as a potential member of leadership. It's an opportunity to listen, to collaborate, to serve, and then to get out and represent the will of the board. And that's something I did recently on the charter school board. We had a great number of wonderful people on that board from different perspectives. And we came together, we discussed, we sometimes debated, and then we took a position, and I helped to create a legislative committee when I joined the charter board to be up on the Hill more and to listen more, and also to explain what we were trying to do. And I think that's always critical. We had a challenging year on the charter board. Many of you know that's where I've served. All my kids have actually gone to district schools, but I see a great value in charter schools, and I greatly appreciated that opportunity. But we had some challenges, and it was a good time to be up on the Hill and make relationships and to be able to address concerns and listen, make sure the legislators' concerns were heard and that they understand what we were trying to do to address those concerns internally, and then to collaborate with this body and also with the legislature in working on solutions. So that would be my approach to leadership. I will just add a couple of points about, I think, perhaps what I can bring to that type of service. I think one of those is my relationships in the business community. We know we have a thriving economy here. I think the more relationships we have, the better. I'm a business lawyer. I've done that for 20 years. I think that serves me well as we're interpreting and analyzing legislation and board rules. I've had to interpret, apply, adjudicate, mediate, deal with what comes from making laws and rules. And I understand the care and precision that needs to go into that. I also have dealt with a lot of the difficult types of issues that come before this board, whether it's personnel and employment issues or discrimination issues. That's been my area of practice for the last 20 years. And reaching out to the business community, I think, is critical as we look at things like Talent Ready Utah and pathways. I think our children have a great opportunity if they're aware of it. And serving on the Chamber of Commerce and making some of those connections, I appreciate all the support the business community provides. I also realize there are gaps that we could fill. And really, it's about having students be empowered to understand the opportunities available to them, to take charge, to take direction of their own future, and connect them with those opportunities. And I think it's important for that business connection to be very strong. Finally, I do think it's important in the environment that we're in to be able to build bridges. And I've done that. I've appreciated the chance to work with Chair Huntsman, Superintendent Dixon, Deputy Superintendent Jones, and Stallings on some difficult issues over the last couple of years. And that bridge building and ability to reach out, especially during difficult times, is critical. And so as we face issues like COVID and other issues that in terms of some of the civil strife we've seen, I think that's critical. I've spent the last few months helping my clients in the business world drink from that COVID fire hose as I've advised them on how to adjust and adapt and take care of things like remote work. Those are some of the same issues that we're dealing with, of course, in education. And so I think the ability to be calm, to reach out, to understand each other, and to come together in a unified way to find solutions is critical. And that's what I would hope to bring to this position. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be considered. And if I'm chosen, I'll give my full effort to this. I do have the time, and I've mentioned a couple of you. I've cut back a couple other volunteer opportunities recently so that I could serve on the board, and would also have the time commitment available to serve in leadership if I'm chosen. So thank you for your consideration.
Hey, thank you both. Are there any questions from the board?
I'm happy to answer any of the questions. I didn't jump in on those, but I'm happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Klein.
Thank you. You both seem very well qualified, but I just have a question on one of your policy views. Recently, there's been a lot of talk about disciplinary policies that should maybe be implemented. So I'm curious where you stand on that. Do you believe that students that are quote unquote marginalized or underrepresented should be given preferential treatment or more lenient consequences for bad behavior than their counterparts?
I could answer that. I think, teachers I hear from want to be sensitive. They want to understand individuals, and some kids have a tougher background, and they need a dedicated and concerned teacher. On the other hand, to eliminate discipline can be a setback, both for kids who need some standards and for the other kids who are trying to learn. So it's a difficult, sensitive subject, but I don't think the answer is to, avoid appropriate and careful discipline. I think that frankly hurts, and I wouldn't want my kids in a situation where they weren't going to be held accountable. So I think coming into this, I'm going to learn a lot, but that's been my experience in the schools and talking to the teachers I know.
I'll go ahead and jump in, and I'll just say that my perspective on discipline comes from really having been a principal at an elementary school and an assistant principal at a junior high school and a high school. And I had really great mentors who taught me that discipline is teaching. That's what discipline is. Discipline is teaching. And sometimes you have to have levels of discipline. And sometimes, honestly, things get to a level where it has to be pretty intense. I got to a level one time with a student that really was to an expulsion type of situation where the student was required to spend so much time out of school and getting some therapy sessions and things. But interestingly, in that hearing with the parents, he at the end of that hearing, he came over to me with a little gift and gave me a hug. And he said, "Thank you for caring enough about me to go through all this and help me understand I've got to do things really differently." So I really think it's all in the approach. I think that, we have guardrails there for a reason. We don't want kids going completely off the tracks. And so it's important. Having said that, there are things out there that are things like you've heard people studying if someone has been through trauma or things like that, how that affects a life and how to work through that while you're also working with the discipline. So I would never in a million years say there is not a place for discipline in our schools. But I would absolutely say that every discipline for every child is teaching. It's teaching and it's coaching and it's redirecting and it's helping children to grow into their full potential, really.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from board members? Okay, I don't see any hands. Oh, Board Member Earl.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Board Member Earl.
Yeah, so I sent the questions out, and I just clarity on the parent question. Is it not necessarily how do we get parents involved, but how do we, as we form our policies, be more inclusive of the idea of supporting parents? And so that's my question: is how can we be more supportive of parents in our policies? Anyways, that's the first question.
Board Member Davis, do you want to take that first? Go ahead.
Sure. I don't know if we're trading off, Jim. We're passing the baton back and forth. I'll go ahead and take this one first. I think that parents are a crucial part in creating our policies. Parents and educators, quite frankly. I think that we need to work together to roll out things that are necessary from our level and mind you, things that are necessary, not a million things that aren't, but those that are, let's roll out things that make sense to parents and educators and have those voices represented on our initial advisory boards, on our initial input teams. And, I remember being in a school district, sometimes people would say, well, we are educators and we're also parents, so we can fill both roles. And I have to say, having left my job for a time and being full-time mom, sitting in the park with my kids on the play dates, I I learned and heard and understood a lot of things differently than I had before. And so I really feel like it's important to have both educators and both parents. We can have parents who are educators and also some parents who are not, because I think they're going to bring a variety of perspectives and can and should be included in the way that we drive and direct our policies. And I think we do that to an extent.
Jim Moss, if you'd like to take that question.
Sure. I've mentioned this to a couple of people. I think it's important at the state board level that we set the tone of respect for parents and make clear that parents don't just deserve a seat at the table, but an acknowledgement that parents create the table. And we, now that I'm an elected official and I've been serving in other roles, I think it's our job to serve the students they send to us and to give all the support to schools and teachers to do that great work, but also always with recognition that even before the state board or the legislature, there are parents and they entrust us with their children. So I think that tone is important to set from the top. It can be down in the weeds. It can be difficult. No teacher, no principal can satisfy every parent. We can be demanding. We can be even annoying as parents, and I've been that parent that showed up and asked difficult questions, and it's a Herculean task. But I do think that tone of respect has to be there. And I think, as I mentioned, community councils are a terrific opportunity. I'd like to see that strengthened and make sure that parents have that choice to exercise their input and even judgment over certain matters. And as we look at our advisory boards, to put out the word that we're listening. And I do think our staff and board members do a great job of that. I just think we can't emphasize that enough, that ultimately we're here to serve the parents and help them. And one thing that I've found working with Cheryl Ellsworth in the state office, at Wasatch, we were talking about outreach to parents through home visits. When I was studying at USC and we were in South Central Los Angeles, a lot of my cohort in my program were inner city school leaders. And they found that one of the things that completed that triangle of teacher, parent, and student was getting on the parents' home turf through these home visits, especially in some of the minority communities, and saying, look, we're here to help. What are your goals for your child? And how can we help you accomplish those? And going on their turf and recognizing their role really made a big change. And the data bear this out. I remember there are studies from Johns Hopkins and others about that particular strategy of home visits, and they were used in the Roy Cohn Project and elsewhere. So it's not a new thing, and Cheryl Ellsworth does a great job here. But I think that point of just respecting parents' role and saying, how can we help you? What are your goals? That experience in LA, it was, Latino parents especially, who perhaps had not been engaged, and suddenly they were at parent-teacher conference and they were asking teachers questions, and their students were engaged, and it came from putting them in the driver's seat. So I think that's critical.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions? Brent Strait.
Thank you. I think all of us ran on the platform of local control. I'd like to hear each candidate talk about what that means to them.
Jim Moss, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I've talked to some of you that the local control can be easily turned into just kind of a bumper sticker, but it's a great question. What does it mean? I think there's a very important role for the state board. I think there's a very important role for districts. And I think ultimately there's a very important role for leaders and teachers who are closest to the student. And as we try to personalize, as we look at things like Portrait of a Graduate, as we, I was rereading a document from 30 years ago. Lorraine might remember this. It was called A Shift in Focus, and it talked about how to shift our focus to have the kid, the student, be the driver, and have how the system would be different if we arranged ourselves around that local relationship where where a teacher and a principal know the student best and formulate something like an individualized approach and plan. And I think local control to me means that. It means making decisions at this place where they are most likely to reflect the needs and desires and goals and abilities of the individual student. And so as I was out talking to folks this election season, I heard things like course selection and places out in Vernal where they don't have a teacher for every course, and they wish they could do some combinations and have some more flexibility, where they wanted to look at things like assessment. And there's some great things being done there as people have looked at assessment and how do we shift a focus towards better ability to use formative assessment, things that make an impact on the day-to-day learning environment of a student. And so I think we need to continue to listen to that practical direction from those who are closest to the student as to how we can best serve their needs and make sure we don't put up barriers, make sure instead we support and strengthen and help schools learn from each other when they've mastered it, when they've learned something. I think we as a state board can help share those ideas while allowing flexibility as to how they're implemented.
Board Member Davis.
Thanks. I think local control is just that. It is control at the local level as much as possible. This is why when I go to our USBA meetings and I listen to the board of directors for the local boards who are elected by the people, I have my ear turned on full. And if you have seen me throughout the last couple of years, you will know that I often will seek input from our local boards, and then I will share that in our state board meetings. I think that this is crucial. I think they help us to drive what they need. And then I think we have to be aware, always be aware at what we are doing at the state level and the impacts that it's having on the local level. I ran into a friend who was a principal at a place of worship, I guess I'll say, once. And I said, "Hey, how's it going? I haven't seen you forever." And this is when I was no longer a principal. And she started to cry. And she said, "We just had our meeting yesterday. And all of the new laws and policies and all the changes that have come out of this last season of legislative and subsequent policy changes were all given to us at the last meeting." And she said, "Cindy, how am I going to do my job? Like, when do I have time to do the work of my job?" And I've never forgotten that conversation. And I think about it every time I'm getting ready to vote on anything. I think about our local board members, our local our parents and our teachers, and what the impact is going to be when whatever it is that we decide rolls out at the local level. Having said that, I think it's really important to note that there is an important place for the Utah State Board of Education. We do so many things at this level that prevent our local folks from having to recreate the wheel over and over and over again. And I'll give you an example of this. Our privacy policies. We had a privacy committee. We've worked on privacy policies. We've looked at a variety of guardrails and safety. And really, I remember when that legislation started, like $1 million was poured into that. But it was, Representative LeVar Christensen in Education Committee said, we're killing a fly with a cannon with this. But for heaven's sakes, for the safety of children, let's get the cannon rolling and be safe. And so our local, our charters, our rural districts, and our big districts all benefited from this. Some people will say, well, our rural districts and our charters will use some of the resources and trainings and things. But quite frankly, there are several things, just like our privacy group, that really help all of our local LEAs, not to have to recreate the wheel over and over and over again.
Okay, I think Molly Hart had some questions. Is that correct? Was that?
I just wanted to ask the two candidates my question. I'm interested in the board governance side of it, as this is a board governance position. How do the two candidates envision striking the balance between making sure that all issues are represented, but in the limited time we have, and making sure single issues don't dominate, especially when it's a single issue that you may or may not be one of your issues that you feel strongly about. How do you balance that, and how do you stay neutral on that?
Board Member Davis, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I think that you are specifically referring to when we, or if we would be filling chairing a full board meeting role.
Yes.
About the formal procedures in board meeting.
Yes.
And I would say really there are a couple of things to consider. One, when you're facilitating a meeting, I really like what Chair Huntsman said, and I believe he has been true to his word when he has said, when he's in the facilitation chair, he says less, he listens more, he tries to provide opportunity for all to speak, and then he moves forward when there's a motion to move forward. So parliamentary procedure is helpful in this arena because we as board members can make a motion to move forward or to call a question or to what have you. I do think that sometimes when you're in a facilitation role, you're going to have to take a back seat a bit. You just are. That's just the nature of the beast. And if your focus is on, I don't know if any of you remember that big meeting where, I don't know if this is getting into politics. I don't know if I should mention politics, but it was the caucus meetings when it was kind of between Senator Hatch and Senator, it's escaping me now. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, I had to chair one of those caucus meetings, and there were like 100 people crammed into this tiny classroom, and it was Bob Bennett. That's who I was trying to remember. They were all screaming about Bob Bennett, and I just went, I'm not going to vote in this meeting. I'm not going to speak in this meeting. I'm not going to share my opinion in this meeting. I am simply going to facilitate this, get it pulled together, move forward, and keep it in a respectful, forward-moving fashion. And that's what I had to do in that meeting, to facilitate and keep it moving. And if that's what we have to do as facilitators, we may have to, like Chair Huntsman said, speak less, listen more. We still do have a vote. And I think that anybody who is facilitating a meeting would still exercise his or her vote. And we can also make a comment, but I certainly think the scales should be heavier on the listening and lighter on the speaking when your focus is on a facilitation.
Thank you.
Jim Moss, go ahead.
Well, I think echo that. It is a facilitative role. Others will take more of, presenting a position. I know in leadership, the role is to make sure that process works in a way that everybody's heard, and we can have collaborative discussion, sometimes debate, and move it along. I think one important thing to note here is that I think committee work is essential in making sure that each idea and each person has an opportunity to be heard. And some of the best work, I think, is done in committees before it all hits the bright lights. And of course here, we're in public on our committees, but still there's that opportunity for some candid exchange and exploration and give and take. And I think that can help tremendously so that when it comes up to the full board, it's already had some deliberation, and the committee's been able to weigh and balance the arguments and weigh in for the full board. So I've appreciated that on the charter board. On our community council, that's one thing I kind of got started in the last year, was some task forces and committees that we hadn't had, and I think it allowed a few more voices to be heard and fleshed out. And then I think, like Cindy said, the role of one who's facilitating is to, move it along and not interfere with the process, but bring the opportunity together and get things done.
Thank you. Board Member Lear has a question.
I do. Thank you, Vice Chair Cummins. And I hope this is brief. As board members, we're always looking for the next, at least I am, always looking for the next bump in the road, hurdle, trying to manage what we've got in front of us, but also anticipating what's coming. And one of those things that seems to repeat itself is the governor wanting to appoint state board members. And on 2 or 3 occasions now, the state board has wrestled with that and defeated that effort, not always unanimously, but it has happened. But that's something that's very near and dear to me, because I believe that education is so important that people should be, the members should be voted for by their constituents, their neighbors, and that should be the strongest voice in education. So I'd like to know what both of you believe about, and it doesn't need to be a long answer necessarily, but do you believe that state board members should continue to be elected, or would you like to move toward a governor appointed board and get those basketball and football tickets?
Go ahead, Jim Moss, if you'd like to go ahead.
Well, I will try to be brief. It's interesting. I've experienced 3 different versions of this. I was appointed by Governor Herbert to the State Charter School Board. I ran 4 years ago in a nonpartisan primary, and then I ran this time in a partisan primary. Each of those had their advantages. I greatly appreciated the chance to sit down with Governor Herbert. He's very thoughtful, and I was grateful for that appointment. The nonpartisan primary, I'll have to say, was a little tricky, as people were trying to canvass a 250,000 person district with no real structure, and it was a tremendous education, but it was difficult. You want to make sure you're connecting and the people have a chance to be heard. It's tough to do that when it's so wide open, honestly. That was just my experience, not so much a philosophical take on it, but frankly, the last go round through the partisan system, it has its detractors, but I had a great number of opportunities to engage with delegates and others. And so, I think that's now been tested. And I think those who are being elected through that process will probably have an opportunity to show what it produced. And I think we have a great group of people who are elected, and those who make those decisions will take a look at what we do and see how it turned out. But I don't know. It's probably above my pay grade. I'd look forward to talking to the board, and whether we're asked for a position or not. I will say that this last go round did have some advantages in the discussions that I was able to have, and I was able to talk to delegates out in Vernal who do what they call cruising for COVID. It was on Friday night. They'd go out and stay socially distanced in their cars, and they'd drive up and down and just wave to each other. But I found, 5 or 6 delegates that took phone calls from me while they were cruising for COVID because they wanted to talk about education. So it was a very engaged group, and it was a lot of fun and a great education for me.
Board Member Davis.
I wouldn't say that this is an issue that I'm passionately driven on. As I've studied it, I think 36 out of 50 states have appointed school board members. I personally really like having an elected school board member. I mean, I went out, I have visited tons of district and charter schools in my area, and visited with parents who are homeschooling and all walks. I mean, I've never been through this form with the delegates, but I have, you know, been to lots of conventions and I know the process. But I'll say I like an elected board. Do I think that our state school board will be destroyed if we move to a format that's like 36 out of the 50 other states, or at least a hybrid of it? I don't think so, but I certainly think you would lose that piece of connection that you get when all of the folks feel like they have a representative on the school board. And the benefit of that, I will say, I think there was recently an issue with the Board of Regents, and I think they do a great job. This is in no way a negative on our friends on the Board of Regents, but I know some folks down in our area at least were concerned, and they were kept writing to me saying, well, who's our representative? Who can we talk to about this issue that we are concerned about? And I just said, you're just going to have to write to the board. You don't have an elected representative to talk to about this issue. So I certainly think there are pros and cons. I personally like this connection, but a lot of states do it the other way. I think they're still standing.
Okay, Board Member Earl, do you have an additional question?
Yeah, I had a couple other questions, and I'll be quick. Let me pull up my thing real quick. Specifically, what role do critical theories play in K-12 schools in the state of Utah?
Okay, Board Member Davis, go ahead.
Well, I think Jenny already knows how I would answer this question. Actually, I think, you know, you may remember back when we were working on health standards, and I voted for almost every single amendment except one that was mentioning a kind of a specific programmatic name, a program or a theory or whatever. I think we have to be really careful about remembering what our lane is. Our lane is to set standards. Our lane is to set minimum basic standards. And I think we need to stick to our lane. I don't think we should fill those with programs or formats that other people have created, because what happens when, or certain websites and things, because what happens when we do that is we lose, control is not the right word, but we could lose direction if those things are referenced in our materials, but then aren't maintained by us. So, you know, I think that we need to stay in our lane, set our minimum standards. If there are standards or pieces of things that we want in anything out there in the world, then we get our committees together, we get with parents and educators and our writers, and we figure out what those are. But I do not think in general we should be putting anything into our standards that has an opportunity to change without us having direction in the change.
Can I just piggyback on that one, just because it leads into my second one, and then Jim can answer. So Cindy, and I'm just wondering in leadership, so when maybe policies or programs that are coming out from the State Office of Education, maybe something that hasn't necessarily been approved or gone through approval from the state board, if there's a discrepancy there in what you've just talked about, as leader in our leadership capacity, how do you see us working through that so that those align better with the intent of the board?
I'm not sure if I fully understand your question, Jenny, so you might have to clarify after I speak. But the role of leadership is to support what the board decided and what the board decides. So it gets a little tricky. I mean, my personal opinion might be different from what the will of the board was, but if I speak or act in a leadership capacity, my responsibility is to represent the board. So I think that the work needs to be done before the board votes. The work needs to be done in-house and in working with each other to figure out what is it that we want to move forward, what is it that we want to author, and what is it that we want to put forward. But once the board has voted, it's a person. If you're in leadership, it's your responsibility. If someone asks you the decision of the board, you have to share the decision of the board. You can't, replace that with your own opinion. Did I understand?
Well, let me ask it a little different.
Jim might be better.
Go ahead.
Maybe I'll get it better when I hear Jim.
Okay, we'll let him answer, then maybe I can clarify.
Go ahead, Jim Moss.
Well, I'll take a stab. I mean, I think what Cindy said about staying in our lane is a good point, that we're here to set standards for learning, and some of the different social theories that come in can kind of sweep in and out. I'll just say this from my experience in law. I engaged on critical legal theory 30 years ago in law school, and then critical race theory and critical pedagogy in my doctoral program at USC, and it can be a bit dangerous. The problem, I think, is that critical theory is not so much a theory. It's the emphasis on the critical, and it becomes, I think, cynically critical sometimes of systems, and creates this kind of binary view. Not to go off, one critical theorist I read years ago, Paulo Freire, criticized what he called the banking model of education, where people just pour things into passive children. And his response to that was to be confrontational and to see the world as an oppressor from which kids need to be liberated. I think the better approach is to help them be empowered by some of the things that we're working on, like personalized learning. I don't think any of us support the idea of a passive student. We want them to be empowered, to be engaged, to make their own decisions, but rather than an oppositional approach that creates sometimes divisiveness, I think we need to look for connections and unity and help them take charge, understand the opportunities, and help them, see their own pathway, and then support them in getting there. And I think, frankly, that some of the critical theory proponents just get in the way of that. So that's a kind of a philosophical topic, but I do think it's just something to be aware of. I think what we want to do is support learning. And I think any child can learn if we help them have the connection to an excellent teacher and good standards, and empower those people closest to them to help them get there.
Okay, so so what happens when what the board passes and what comes out of our office don't align? And I guess maybe that, I don't know if that got confused there. How as leadership and as in that leadership capacity, can we help make that correction so that it aligns with the intent of the board direction, board policy?
That to me, is that follow up to me?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim Moss.
Sorry, Vice Chair. Well, I certainly think the board has a role of oversight. That role of board and staff is one that I've come to know and appreciate on the charter board. And so, if the board passes something and there's some disconnect, then I think we have to revisit, whether the policy is being carried out, and listen. And it's a sensitive subject, but I'm not sure if I'm answering correctly. I think we need to be responsible to ensure that any practices that are carried out under the name of the board are consistent with board policy and legislation. And if not, try to tactfully take a look at correction to make sure that we're all in line. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know if you want to add more, Cindy, or not, if that more clarity, or if you're good. So either way, I'm good.
I'll just say that it really kind of goes also to the law question that you sent us ahead of time. Really, when, what happens if we're doing things that maybe aren't aligned with the law? What happens if we're doing things that maybe aren't aligned with a board vote? But I will say where it gets trickier is with the word that you mentioned, with intent, because what it really boils down to is we have to vote. And if we need to clarify intent in our discussions before we vote, then we may need to have more conversation, because it's difficult to determine what the intent was of 15 people when they voted the way they did. And so I think, but notwithstanding, I think we need to go back. We often do this. We often, even ourselves, will say, no, that's not what we did in that meeting. And someone else will say, yes, it was. And so we have to pull back the motion. We have to read through what happened, look at the minutes, look at the language, and then see if our actions coming out are consistent with what we go back and revisit from the board conversations and the board votes. And that would be my approach, is to always go back to the minutes, go back to the votes, find out how it transpired, and to see if our actions are consistent with what we did, not maybe my interpretation of our intent, but what we did, and then make sure that we are consistent moving forward with
Thank you.
With board policy.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for answering my questions.
Okay, thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you for those of you in the hot seat for answering. Appreciate your time. So I see no hands, so we'll go ahead and have Ben send the email and we can vote.
Okay, the email should be on its way. There it is. So I'm showing everyone has voted except for Member Lear and Mr. Moss.
And I did receive emails from both of them with their votes.
Okay.
Thank you. Jerry, we're ready to move. Thank you.
Vice Chair Cummins, can I just take a moment while the vote's being counted?
She's not in this room anymore, Mark.
Yep, she's out. So just in the interest of time, please pay attention, if you would, to Lorraine's email that will come out shortly on your preferences for committees, and that will come out to you. It's not a guarantee you'll be in a committee, but we certainly want to know what preference, if you have a preference serving in all of our different committees, so you'll be filling in some blanks and that of what your interest is, like first choice, second choice, or if you have anything that you absolutely don't want to do. I've had a few of those come in, say, please don't put me there. I wouldn't serve very well in that capacity. And then we'll be working on with board leadership those assignments early so that you're prepared for next year on those, and we'll be reaching out, talking to you to make sure you're good to accept those committee assignments, and if not, we can certainly attempt to do some restructuring. But your feedback is really important in what your preferred interests are. But again, there's no way to guarantee that. I know finance is nicknamed Funance, and everyone wants to get into finance. I'm just teasing a little bit. It's pretty challenging sometimes in there, but we'll just do our best to listen to you and get you working and know what your assignment is early so you can start getting prepared. So appreciate your response. The sooner you respond, then the quicker we can respond back to you on those assignments. So thank you for your time and listening to me. I've been turning my screen off now and again. I have to adjust this leg now and again to a little different position. That's why I've been stepping out some of the video screen.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Great. I'll go ahead and announce the second vice chair position is going to board member Cindy Davis. It was a 9-6 vote. So thank you. Thank you all for your willingness to participate, your willingness to be a part of the process, and your willingness to be here this evening and cast your vote. So thank you all for your time tonight. That is the end of our agenda, and it completes our meeting. So.
Thank you, Vice Chair Brittany Cummings.
Thank you, Brittany. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Good night.